Hello, my name is Milind, and this is going to be my fourth video journal entry regarding my placement as a teaching assistant in the Fitness and Health Promotion Department at Cambridge College. Today, I'm going to be discussing some of the challenges that I've faced in the workplace and how I countered them, what could have been done to counter them, as well as the support that I've received to counter them. The other portion of today's journal entry will be regarding what I would have done if I was a supervisor to help someone in my position, as well as what other changes can I make in general to help the internship or the placement experience for the employee themselves. The first portion of this video journal is going to be surrounding the challenges that I have personally faced and experienced throughout my placement here and for the duration that I have completed so far, at least. And I will be diving into them and describing them in detail and giving some context to help you understand why they were challenges to me. There are two main challenges that I would like to highlight. The first of them being that teaching my own class was very difficult. The challenge in this position, the point that I want to focus on is that it was very difficult getting through to them and changing their perception of me from their perception of me as a student to the perception of a teacher or a person who's actually educating them. It was very difficult for me to step into those shoes in front of them, as they were not willing to accept me in that role, as they had already been taught by Lynn for a significant amount of time. They knew that she was a teacher, but they always saw me as a student. So this was something very challenging. I had a very difficult time overcoming this, as the respect aspect as a teacher is very important. If they don't respect you, they don't respect the information that you're providing them. And this was the main issue with me teaching them. And I did speak to Lynn about this, but regardless, there was scheduling mismatch, so I couldn't directly teach the OTPA students. I'm not 100% sure whether that issue is accurate or not, but that is what I was told. So I was supposed to teach the last session, which was my own class. Speaking of the questions that are included in this section, the nature of the challenge was just a personal relationship with my peers. Building that relationship was took a lot of time. So breaking down that relationship and building a new relationship as a teacher will take that same amount of time at the very least. And that was time that I did not have. The strategies that I used to overcome that, at least a little bit, was start behaving more like a teacher and stop joking around and playing around with them during class. This did help a little bit, but it still did not change their perspective completely. Although the next thing that I did was I started preparing better and better and better. And I started understanding my own material and the material that I had to teach them, which made me come off more professional and help them understand that I knew what I was doing and the information that they're getting from me is accurate. So instead of them respecting me and then respecting the information that they gave me, I tried switching it around and made them respect the information that I gave them, which in turn led to them respecting me. This did work better than the first approach, and it did seem to have significant effects towards the end, at least. Now, when I enter class and start teaching them, it is a much simpler process, and I'm able to teach them more comfortably and smoothly. When answering the last question, which is whether I was sufficiently supported by my supervisor to overcome these challenges, this challenge at least, I have to mention that Lynn had her hands tied. She could not do much in order to help me out. And I understood that from the get-go. So I did talk to her about methods to overcome it. And she did help me come up with the methods that I did implement. So she definitely did support me. She supported me as much as she could. Moving on to the next challenge that I had mentioned earlier, it was teaching after attending just two classes. As I mentioned before, the class that I had to teach was at the last slot, and there were two slots before this. I came prepared. I came prepared with the information that I was supposed to have. But at the end of the day, the way the class goes is only known by Lynn. She guides it in a certain way, the way she's been guiding it for years. She has a certain routine and a certain pattern through which she goes. And I had to watch that pattern happen twice over the two classes, over the 4 hours before the class that I had to teach, and get close to mimicking it, or at least get the same amount of information out, which was extremely difficult. Being exposed to something, learning a concept for the first time 4 hours before you have to teach it is quite difficult, especially because it's such a dynamic setting and you don't have time to absorb all of that information completely. You have to be on your feet, you have to listen to what she's saying, help the students out, make sure that you're all over the place. So this did end up being very challenging. However, I did use certain methods to overcome this. As the second question would be, the strategies that I implemented to overcome this were very simple. I just ensured that the first class was me absorbing as much information as I can, and the second class was me absorbing whatever bits of information that I didn't get in the first class while assisting students. So it was more of a hybrid setting in the second class, which allowed me to use that information and learn more while listening to the information again. So I made sure to maximize the efficiency at which I was functioning during those two classes in order to reach that level of teaching for the third class that I had to teach. It did have certain effects. I wouldn't say that it was a complete success, but it did definitely improve the way that I taught towards the end. I did still end up taking quite a bit of help from Lynn during those classes, but I believe that that was inevitable. That had to be done in order for me to get a complete teaching experience. I cannot match her knowledge or intensity with just 4 hours of learning. She has years of experience above this in teaching and the subject matter itself. But I definitely believe that I tried my best and I did whatever I could in my power to help. Again, speaking of how she supported me, coming to the third question in this first section, I do believe that she supported me a whole lot through this challenge specifically. She was always ready to help at any portion. She never made me feel like I wasn't good enough as a teacher. She was always supportive and ensured that I felt confident enough to teach. So even during the first two classes, she made sure that I got the concepts. And if I had any questions, I could ask her in between, make sure that I'm clear on those concepts because I have to teach them soon enough. She definitely helped me out a lot through that entire process. The last portion of this video journal is surrounding me imagining that I were a supervisor or a manager myself, basically me being in Lynn's position and helping out another student who is in my position, and discussing what strategies I would use to alleviate the challenges that I felt. I definitely feel that the first step that I would take as a manager is preparing the employee or the student who's in the TA position very well for the classes beforehand, giving them the material, making sure that they know what is being taught beforehand. I was available to attend the theory class beforehand, so I did have a rough idea, but I still had no idea of how the lab was going to be run, the schedule or the sequence in which Lynn was running it. As I mentioned before, she has a very set sequence. And even if she jokes about something, that joke is still part of the sequence. So she has a certain order that it goes in. I had no idea about that order beforehand. So I would make sure that if I was a supervisor, I would let the employee or the student know the order and know how I plan on moving ahead with the class, first and foremost. And secondly, I would just ensure that they are comfortable coming into class and learning and behaving like a student for the first two classes rather than being a TA for the first two classes. Just absorbing as much information as they can for the first two classes and then just making sure that they can use that information to teach the remaining students for the third class. Or I would honestly prefer it if they would just learn it on the day before itself and then come and teach it. Then moving on to the challenge of teaching their own peers, I wouldn't make them teach their own peers. I understand personally what the difficulty of teaching someone that you have a pre-established relationship with is, So I would definitely have them teach maybe one of the OTPA batches instead of the F Pro batch, in order to allow them to feel more comfortable in the teaching role and have the students listen to them and respect the information that they give. Because I did notice that at quite a few times, the OTPA students did receive information from me much better than my own peers from the F Pro class. Moving on to the last question. Uh, what other changes would I make as a supervisor that would improve the workplace? I personally feel that the workplace was ideal. It was a good learning environment. It was a good teaching environment. I wouldn't change too much about the learning space itself, the workspace. But I would definitely implement the changes that I mentioned earlier with those challenges specifically. I did not face any other challenges with the workplace. Everything else was available and easy to manage. So I would definitely not want to change anything else. To conclude, I would just like to say that the challenges I faced were very unique to me. Maybe someone else would not face the same challenges as I did, but these challenges were very important to me. They were difficult to get through, and the techniques that I used were very useful, albeit they did not get me the results that I was hoping for, but they still did make my situation much better and alleviate those challenges. And finally, if I were a supervisor, I would use I would change a few factors of the placement to make it easier on the employee. But other than that, I feel that Lynn did an absolutely great job of being a supervisor and assisting me through these challenges. And mainly keeping the workspace as the same would be a focus as a supervisor, because I was very comfortable and easy to work in. Thank you very much.